Hello, Melissa Crook here from the Field Podcast. Welcome back today. Today's episode is Taking Time for You is Not Lazy with Leigh Shulman. And the ways to engage with us are as follows. Do you have a problem with seeing rest or naps as lazy? Even if you have a short amount of time, this time for you is not wasted, nor is it laziness. Give yourself permission to get the rest your body and mind needs. And don't let old stigmas or narratives or other people's thoughts or opinions about that dissuade you from taking care of you. We hope this helps you this week as you engage with taking time for you is not lazy with Leigh Shulman. We hope you enjoy this episode. Take good care. Hello, Field Podcast audience. Welcome back this week. I'm Melissa Crook, your host here at the Field Podcast, and I've got a new friend here with me today, Leigh Shulman. And Leigh has got a great story to tell, both as a woman in her personal story, but also the work that she does that really supports women's voices. So it's going to be a multi-layered, the Embracing Layers Network here. So multi-layered conversation that she has taken action and done some things in her life that are so aligned with what we talk about here. So I'm really excited to dive in and get to share that part of her story and all the different ways that she has learned how to walk through these different talking points and how she shows up unapologetically for herself and for other women in all the ways that she's engaged in the world. So Leigh describes herself as patient, creative, and she loves to explore. Leigh Shulman, welcome to the Peel Podcast.
Thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. I'm excited for this conversation. Let's get right into it. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. Talk to me about prioritizing self-care in your life and what that journey has looked like for you. And I have a feeling I know what you might jump into here, but I'll let you go ahead and go, and then I'll prompt with other questions if I need to. But I think I know where you're going here. But go ahead and share with our audience.
All right. So, self-care, I think, has to be number one because we don't have energy for anything else when we don't have energy. And, you asked, well, what was my journey with self-care? Well, I'll tell you, I don't think I really became aware of it until my daughter was young. She was a baby still. And I hadn't really slept when I was pregnant, and then I didn't sleep for a long time after she was born. And at a certain point, I started getting these terrible, terrible migraines to the point where I wasn't really functioning. And it's funny because I was reading your story and I hear from other people that a lot of us have to kind of get to this edge where we're no longer functioning properly in order to prioritize self-care. And I feel like, God, can't we just not do that? Can't we prioritize it before we're sick?
Yeah.
But it really did take me kind of being flat and not being able to do anything to be able to say, like, all right, I can't do this anymore. And I think it's taken a long time to get to a point where I do put myself first, because I think we get into such a habit of always putting other people first that we don't even realize we're doing it. That sometimes even, what we think we actually want is really we want it because somebody else we care about wants it.
Yeah.
And learning to know the difference took me a while. It took a while.
Yeah, when you're living a certain way, it just seems natural to you. It can take something, I agree with you. The reason I come on here and have these conversations is we've got to quit hitting a wall before we start prioritizing ourselves. We've got to start talking about this and provide frameworks and insights so that people are, in our generation, but people that are younger than us, our daughters, our children can do healthier by themselves and realize that this idea of prioritizing your wellness is not selfish at all. It's actually really healthy. And it's actually, my friend Erin Copeland calls it self-full. It is filling your own cup so that you've got your most restored, rejuvenated, authentic self to give to others. No one wins when you're coming at them depleted and irritable and tired with nothing left to give. And so just reframing the way we've thought about that, but also, and we'll get into this a little later when we talk about living out of our own expectations, because you hit on something really important that you have to stop and think, is that really what I want? Or is that I'm doing it on behalf of what someone else wants? And we'll talk about that because that's a big part of this. But talk to me about what are some of your practices? I know you took a year off to focus on yourself. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, that's what I called my year of selfish. And I chose the word selfish very specifically because it is a word that's used very often to say, oh, you wanna spend a day by yourself? Well, that's selfish. You're not showing up for other people. And I wanted to redefine the word for myself. So I chose selfish as my word of the year. And throughout the year, the main question was, what do I want? What is it that I actually want here? And I think that's when I started to realize how often I don't really know what I want, and I'm making decisions based on not knowing what I want, which I think also very much goes back to knowing how you feel, knowing your emotional state. If you don't know that you're sad, you can't address it. If you don't know that you're angry, you can't address it. And that doesn't once you even know, it's still difficult because then you still have to have conversations and you still have to address it. And you never know how the people around you are going to react to it. So for those reasons, I think it's easier for us to just be like, you know what, I'm fine, when you're not fine.
Yeah.
And so that year was really, it was just a great year for me to focus on figuring out what it is that I actually want, which allowed me to then set the boundaries that I need to have.
Yeah.
Because I think that also, we're all about setting boundaries and we talk a lot about it, but if you don't know what you want, there's no way for you to set boundaries.
Exactly. And that goes nicely into confidently setting boundaries. So coming out of that, well, first, what was the driver behind you taking that year? And then talk to me about the boundaries you learned you needed to set around your wellness, your time, people you surrounded yourself with, all of those things.
So in setting my own boundaries, I realized I need a lot more time for myself than I've been having. And I don't remember exactly when I thought this, but there was a point of time when I realized I'm never alone. I'm either with, and I think that sort of started when my daughter was a baby. There was always something going on. And even now, there's always something going on. But I've learned, okay, when I just can't take anymore and I just need to be by myself. And, for example, I'm actually, and here's one boundary. We live in Argentina. We're about to go to the US to visit family. And on my way there, I'm going early. So there's a stopover in Buenos Aires on the way to Atlanta. I'm going early. I have a day to myself there. In addition to everything, I'm meeting up with a photographer to take photos for my business. So it's been such a fun process. And basically we've chosen a neighborhood in Buenos Aires and she's going to walk around with me and take photos. And it's just become this really fun day that not only gives me space, gives me time where I get to have my hair and makeup done at night, which is not something I'm regularly doing. It's not something I want to do regularly, but I love the idea that I get to do it this time for something that I then get to share on my website and show up in a way that's not photos that I've had forever.
Yeah.
So, and that's just one small example of how I have started to work, I guess, saying yes to myself into my life.
Yeah, I love that. Saying yes to yourself and your life and not saying no to yourself and your life because you're saying yes to everything else. And you're learning the power of saying no to other things so you can say yes to your life. There's a lot of power in that. But it goes back to, you said something important earlier of not even knowing what you wanted. I have this conversation with women all the time. I have a friend who I was having this conversation with a couple months ago, and she's getting into a season of her life where her kids are older now. They're able to drive. She's not having to spend as much time in the car running them around. So she's all of a sudden has this kind of unexpected hour here, hour there that she's just never had before. And she doesn't like know what to do with it. And I'm like, well, what do you like to do? And she's like, I don't even know anymore. I'm like, okay, go backwards, go back to time before all of these wonderful people arrived in your life, and what lit you up? What did you enjoy? Did you enjoy reading? Did you enjoy coffee with a friend? Did you enjoy going for a walk? Did you enjoy yoga? Did you enjoy listening to your favorite music and having a dance party around the room? And whatever it is, go back to that. And then also too, and we'll get to this later as we at the end of the conversation, but write down those things that nourish you. Write down and find a way to incorporate that. Or guess what? Take a nap, sit down outside and just listen to the quiet and do nothing, and just let your body reset, refill, settle everything in your system. And so many times we ask women those questions, and it's shocking because they aren't the women you expect. These are women that are out there doing the thing, and they're busy and they're engaged and they're wonderful people, and somewhere along the way they have forgotten what it is that even lights them up or refreshes them. And so
Mhm.
taking that space to rediscover that is such an important part of our health and wellness journey.
Absolutely. And I think also, I think sometimes what do you want to do with that hour? And I think we can often put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do something so called productive,
Yeah.
or that we have to do it in a certain way. And that will often happen when I'm working with moms who have kids of all different ages and they want to write, and they think they're supposed to take, oh, I have an hour, I should write during this time. And
Hmm.
before I go into what I was about to say, the word should to me is always a sign that you're doing something that by someone else's rules. What do you mean
Yeah.
should? And I always tell people the story, like when my daughter was a baby, again going back to that, I finally found someone to babysit her. We did 2 mornings a week. And the first day I went to a cafe and I had my computer and I had my notebook and pens, and I was like thinking I was gonna write. And I got a coffee and I literally sat and just stared at the wall and watched people for 2 hours.
Hmm.
And I needed that. And
Yeah.
years have passed, and now I wouldn't want to do that because I would find it boring now.
Yeah.
At the time, like you were saying, it just needed to reset. I needed
Yeah.
to just be there and not be doing anything, not be responding to anything except for what I saw and what I was feeling, and sip my coffee. And that for me was just, I mean, it was exactly what I needed. And a little bit at a time, because most times for a long time after that, I would go to the cafe and I would sit and maybe I'd pull out my notebook or do something, and a
Hmm.
little bit at a time. And I think those little movements forward, we don't recognize how important they are, because we're, again, like you said, perfection before, not aiming for perfection.
Yeah.
We want to do it all. The idea that you've had a child, now you're not really sleeping, and also this is variable. So I'm talking about having a baby, it can be so many other things. And the idea that you can just jump from that and suddenly be a full-time writer and get
Yeah.
everything 100%, not that anybody gets anything 100%, but we put that pressure on ourselves. And of
Hmm.
course you're going to fall short when what you really need is to sit there and do nothing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
you gotta allow time to refill your tank, and especially when you're changing seasons and all of a sudden you've got other responsibilities that go along with it. Okay, what's going to come in that shift? We look at other people's lives and see how that's necessary for them, but as women, we have a hard time sometimes stopping to ask ourselves those very same questions.
yeah. And I actually, one example. So the room that I'm sitting in now, it's my office. This used to be my daughter's room. This was her
Mm,
bedroom.
mm,
And there's that idea of how can I take my daughter's bedroom for my office? And there's something incredibly symbolic about all of that. Now, the way that worked is I asked her and she said, fine.
Yeah.
She was perfectly happy with it. She's no longer living in Salta. She's in university. She has her space. She has her life there. And so, she was like, yeah, take it. And part of that is I feel really, really good about the fact that my daughter knows how to leave space for other people and herself.
Yeah. 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 That's so good. And knowing that as a mom that you were able to impart that upon your daughter after what you had to go through to get there yourself is so powerful. I have 3
Yeah.
daughters, so I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, I was so touched that there was not even a moment of, oh, yeah, but that's my room. Her first thing was like, yeah, do it, take it,
Yeah.
and it was a gentle sort of like step-by-step process. I'm big on gentle step-by-step processes. But, I have my own office now, which I didn't for many years.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that, how that unfolded too. All right. Talk to me about taking care of emotional health, physical health, mental health, all those things. They all fit together. Talk to me about your journey with that and maybe even the difference that you noticed before you were really tending to yourself well and after.
All right. So in terms of self-care, and a lot of times people talk about self-care and they're talking about bubble baths, and I don't. I mean, I think I heard you say that too. Like, it's not about bubble baths. It's not about nails. It's about, which it can be, and that's fine. And that's wonderful.
Sure.
But self-care is often about the stuff that feels a lot harder. It's going to the doctor. It's saying no when you can't do something. It's, I mean, how many moms have you been about to eat something and your kid's like, I want that. And I feel like, I usually do. I'm just like, fine, take it. But sometimes I don't. And so I'm like, not right now, not this time.
Yeah.
And, okay, so I always say that sleep is my first line of defense.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not sleeping, I'm not myself.
Yeah.
If I go too long without sleeping, I get migraines. I don't function. I can't do my work. I certainly can't juggle the endless things that seem to happen in life. Or when something suddenly happens you're not expecting it, if I'm exhausted, I am not in a headspace to be able to deal with it. And I think, being cranky, being angry. I mean, I'm angry, I'm sad, and all these. I can't regulate my emotions when I'm tired.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I do is I make sure to get enough sleep. Occasionally, like last night, we had a sleepover. We had 5 boys over. And I did at a certain point. It was midnight. I'm like, I'm going to bed. Do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And no, it wasn't that. It was fine, actually. And that's another part. Maybe things will go to hell if you step out and take care of yourself. But I think it's really important to check and just do it anyway. Because a lot of times you're going to find out, no, it's fine. And you can take care of yourself and they can too.
Yeah. The world's not going to fall apart if without it. And it's really powerful for them to see you prioritizing yourself. It's powerful to know that that's an important part of what she needs to do. And it helps them, if you have daughters, it helps them to understand that's important for themselves. If you have sons, it's important for them to understand that if they have partners later that are women, that this is a reasonable part of the expectation and that they understand that and they've seen that modeled. I mean, there's so many parts of this that are important and they learn to fend for themselves. And, it's just, it's multi-layered in the benefits that you receive from that outside of just taking care of yourself well.
Absolutely. And it also means you can, when you are baseline okay, you've eaten well, you've gotten enough sleep, you're not hurting, your body's not hurting, then you can thrive. Then that is the basis to do every other thing that you want. It's also the basis to kind of figure out what you want. Because if you're hurting, you're tired, you're not functioning, how are you supposed to know what you want? And I
Yeah.
think a really, because often I feel like I'm being pulled in a million directions.
Hmm.
And sometimes I enjoy it because I feel really accomplished that I can do all of these things at once,
Sure.
but not all the time. I can't do it all the time. And there are times that I'm just like done and I need to shut down, whether that means going to bed or going for a walk or like I'm going to a cafe and I'm not even gonna worry about what I'm doing there. I'm just gonna do something to recharge. And also meeting friends. One thing
Hmm.
I've been doing a lot lately is, it's summertime here in Argentina, and so we
Yeah.
take the kids to camp, and then I've been meeting up with a group of friends for breakfast.
Oh, that's
And
great.
it's a joke, but we call the group Ladies Who Lunch. But actually, the original name of the group was, it's in Spanish, but it's like vagancia, which I think
Hmm.
means kind of like laziness. But I changed the group, and it was a joke. We've been joking about it,
Yeah.
but I changed the group name to like Ladies Who Lunch. I'm like, I like that better, because the ladies. It has negative connotations, but
Absolutely.
I would say it doesn't have negative connotations because it's a group of women who get together and just do something they want to do.
Yeah. But isn't
So
it interesting though that the default to that when you officially started it was like, oh, because we're doing something for ourselves and refilling our cups by being in community and sharing time with each other, that's lazy because it's not quote unquote productive. I mean, even just changing narratives around what that means and what lazy
yeah,
actually is versus how we use it. It goes back to how we use what selfish actually is versus how we use it, and redefining correct and using correct terminology because that girlfriend time is important. And
yeah,
those relationships are part of our wellness journey and our health journey. And you also said, really getting your sleep, making sure you're eating, you've had water, all those things impact your ability to function, to think through things, to not be overcharged, to be emotionally regulated so that you can make decisions. And I think I know what you mean. Sometimes when there's a lot of things happening, I get a lot of energy off that. I get energy off that when I've come into that space rejuvenated and rested. I feel run down by that when I'm already overtapped and I need to step back and take a break. So, I mean, even just recognizing those pieces of when it feels, um, you know, energizing versus when it feels depleting.
exactly. And I think just paying attention to what we're feeling in our bodies and
Yeah,
emotionally is the best guide. But when you're constantly running and doing and running around, you lose track of that. And so we
you
lose
do.
track of our cues that are saying, okay, you gotta sit down. Okay, don't ask me another question right now. I
Yeah,
can't I can't do another thing at the same time right now.
yeah,
I find I say that a fair amount because I do get to a point where I am really good at multitasking. We're not supposed, so-called not supposed to multitask, but I do. So I'll be
yeah,
doing one thing and I have this in mind, and somebody comes in and asks me a question, and yeah, then I'll hit that point where I'm like, ooh, my cup has run over in not a good way, and I
yeah,
can't take anymore.
yeah,
And saying, "Oh, I can't take it," like to say it like that almost feels dramatic, but that's how I feel. Like I feel like I
yeah,
have completely and utterly hit an edge, and I know that I felt that for many, many years before I realized I was feeling it.
yeah,
I ignored it for many, many years.
yeah.
And I also want to say, going back to community, okay, so one thing that's really nice about these get togethers is it's with women I know, but it's also introducing me to spend time with people that I know because,
Mm,
we're in the same groups, but I didn't know them as well. And now I
yeah.
really like them. And there's something really wonderful about having your circle widen with
Mm,
people that you really enjoy spending time with, who are kind and loving, who share values with you. There's something really, really wonderful about that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I would say that feeling was why I started my writing community also, because
Mm,
it's not easy to find, if you have kids in school, or you're in a mom's group or whatever the case may be, yes, you can find other moms, but even then you're not necessarily going to find moms who you want to spend time with.
Yeah, they may not be aligned with you. Yeah, I mean, you have the common denominator of being a mom, but that doesn't mean other things line up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a friend of mine said that to me here, where I had said something about, when we drop our kids, because in New York, when I lived in New York, we would always get together and all hang out. And granted, our kids were younger then, so maybe that was why. But it went on for quite a few years. And when I got here, it was more like, just drop them off and you don't have to stay. At birthday parties also. And a woman that I know, that one of the first people I met here, she said to me, she's like, yeah, just because our kids are friends doesn't mean we want to be friends.
Yeah.
And there was something very liberating about that, like, oh, I learned the same thing. Just because somebody, I live in Argentina, everyone speaks Spanish. Just because somebody is fluent, speaks English, doesn't mean I actually want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
So, and those are, that's always, sometimes we settle, like, there's no one else I can talk to because I'm not fluent in Spanish. So here's a person who speaks English, so I will spend time with that person.
Yeah.
But it's important to take that next step and be like, do I want this? So I'm always going back to like, what do I want? What do you want? That's so important.
And what do you need? Who do you need to surround yourself with? You talked about that piece of having supportive people around you is so important.
Mm-hmm. We need community.
We do.
We really need community. And, so much, in my experience, so many times community is a source of stress instead of connection, because of all the shoulds and how you're supposed to show up. One thing about parenting in New York that I found incredibly anxiety provoking, that I didn't realize that it was happening until I moved away from it. There's so many unspoken rules. And of if I invite you over, when do you invite me over? And these are just examples. Or like, if I ask you for help, what does the reciprocation look like? That I didn't even realize how anxious they were making me. And that anxiety affected my everything in the same way not sleeping affects everything. Being anxious about things because I didn't know what to expect from people. We might have shared the same values, we might not have, but it was hard to get there because I wasn't sure what we were supposed to be doing. And I couldn't feel comfortable. And that, I would say, I don't want to blame the other moms in that circumstance. I think that was about me. And learning, again, tuning into your own body and recognizing, oh, I feel anxious. Why am I anxious? Because it could have been as easy as just asking a question like, oh, what would you like in response if I'm doing this? But I didn't ask those questions because I didn't realize I needed to.
Yeah. And that next step, that next level, that getting curious, but we get so concerned in the moment about showing up the way others expect us, showing up in the way that's going to please other people, showing up, and we disassociate from our own bodies and our own feelings. When I finally started paying attention to the cues and realizing my body was trustworthy and was sending me messages for years that I needed to tune into, and that if I tuned into sooner, I wouldn't have gotten to the space I was. But I was managing everybody else's and trying to make sure everybody else was happy and I wasn't disappointing anybody else. And we do that as women so much rather than just stopping and getting curious. What's this coming from? Okay, what can I do about this? And just addressing it. And so many times, if you just address it and be like, a lot of times people may come back and be like, oh, no, don't worry about that. Oh, do this. And it's not anything that we've built up in our heads. We treat these thoughts and these narratives as truth rather than getting curious about them, asking why, and then asking the next question, because we're so indoctrinated in how we're supposed to show up and what society expects of us.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of truths. Communication and community go together. You can't build a community of people you trust, who support you, if you can't communicate with them. And that, that's also like, okay, maybe this person, you can't communicate with this person, and that definitely happens. But again, and that's also self-care. What do I need? How do I communicate this with other people? what gets in the way of me communicating. And that's where I'm saying, like, self-care it's not that easy. I wish it was all bubble
No.
baths. Self-care is like,
Yeah.
I do my budget. I make sure my accounting is done. I go to my doctor's appointment. I don't like any of that, but I
Mm-hmm.
love knowing that I'm healthy and that I can do the things I want to do and that I'm not hurting myself as I go through my life.
Yeah, you're taking care of those things that will cause stress and anxiousness and sadness and fear if you don't
And
deal with them
pain,
and
physical
don't address
pain
them, and
too.
pain. Absolutely. All those things. Yeah, it's so multi-layered and so multifaceted. Thank you so much for that. And we're going to come back to the communication piece in a minute, but I want to talk about first how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. You do this a lot in your work, really, by providing the platform you do. But talk to me about your journey with that and getting to the space where you are today.
Mhm. So the living unapologetically. So, I wrote a blog post that I don't think I ever posted it about, basically called No More Apologies.
Mm,
Um, because we do have a tendency to say I'm sorry when really we're saying something else. I can't,
yeah.
I don't have space. This won't work for me. I I there's that thing where they'll say, like, when a friend of mine actually said this to me, when you're walking on, and I've seen this from other people, if you're
Hmm.
walking on the sidewalk and there's a man and a woman walking on the sidewalk sort of towards each other, if one of them is going to move out of the way, it's almost always the woman.
Yeah. She'll
And
get behind
my
the man.
mhm. And my friend, but I'm even saying, like, strangers on the street,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
and my friend who's a man, his name is Josh. He was saying he noticed that and he decided to kind of play chicken with people and
Mm,
see what they would do if he didn't move, because he would find that he would move to avoid an actual collision. And
yeah.
so he just kept walking. And he said he was, like, colliding with people on the street all the time, men on the street, but not women, because women would always move.
Yeah.
And, I guess what I take from that is men need to be more flexible. We need to move more. Women need to stay on path more, but never 100%. And it's that not 100% part that I think is the hardest part to negotiate
Yeah.
when you're living unapologetically. When do you leave room for other people? And when do you say, no, 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 this is mine. This is for
Yeah.
me. And, you know, with language, with words, with telling your story, particularly when you're telling a personal story, which often ends up where you're sharing things that are hard to share. And that,
Yeah.
the more authentic you are, the scarier it can be, because do you want to let people know that I'm selfish, I have bad breath in the morning, and that's not even a big deal. But, do you want to let people know what your flaws are?
Hmm.
But as a writer, flaw, you don't want to let people know what your flaws are, and you try to avoid conflict. Yet,
Hmm.
as a writer, if your written pieces don't have flaws and conflict, they're boring and nobody wants to read
Yeah.
them.
People can't connect with it.
And that's just kind of who we are as humans. Like, we have conflict, we're all flawed,
Hmm.
and having humor around those flaws is humor and honesty around those flaws is the most useful way to address them. And then
Hmm.
when you find people who can't do that with you, those are probably not your people, you
Exactly.
know?
And I think that going back to that, something you said earlier, when it comes to living unapologetically and supporting other women in doing so, part of the ability to do that is surrounding yourself with people that want you to be your most authentic, healthiest self. They don't they're not looking for you to be someone that's convenient for them, that's hurtful to you when you're convenient for them. And so that's part of the piece too, is looking at who you're surrounding yourself with, because when you show up unapologetically as your authentic self, it invites others into that space with you. And this doesn't have to be I think people sometimes get this vision of unapologetic as loud, in your face, abrupt kind of thing. And it's like, no, it's just me being my most authentic self. And if I in that moment feel like I need to be loud and abrupt because I'm trying to get someone's attention who is not receiving me and my voice and my right to be here and to take up space and have an opinion. And so that piece of who you surround yourself is so key. But talk to me, and along with that, not but and talk to me about how with writing you decided, because you're very specific, that you provide platforms for women and those who identify as women and non-binary people, and that's such a powerful space to go into, to feel supported, to know that, and you help people find their voices in a variety of ways, whether it's organizing their time, whether it's tapping into it via memoir or nonfiction in some way, whether it's figuring out how to write appropriately for their career and their jobs, to explain clearly and well their expertise and how to communicate that way. You provide a variety of formats, and then also with just organizing their time and all those different things. But what made you decide to focus this specifically for women and those who identify as women?
Well, it's a funny question, because the reason I ultimately did that, for a very long period of time, I was open to anybody.
Mm.
It really is 98, 99% of the people who found me and wanted to work with me were women. And a couple of years ago, I was working, I went with that. And the reality is, whatever it is about me, women seem to relate to me more. And I do have some male clients, and they're wonderful. And there's a part of me that says I don't want to cut people out.
Sure.
But ultimately, the reason I made that decision is I started working with a marketing team. I realized I need to do someone else to do my marketing if I'm going to, do my best work. And I asked them, well, what do you think? And they're like, well, if most of your company just for marketing purposes, just make this for women. And, there was, that's that part of me that's like, I don't want to cut people out. There's a little bit of people pleaser in that.
Yeah.
There's a value, and there's a real value to it. And that is my value, because I do want to make space for people. And I don't want to just say no because you look a certain way, or you have a certain body part that I don't. But, but the reality is I really enjoy working with women, and well, and not just women identifying but non-binary, because there's a shared experience that we have of living in a world where the rules are made by men on a level and the historical level, and what it has meant to try to show up and often have to conform in those environments. That whatever it is about the way I work with people, I leave space for that. And, I think there's also a side, and I want the whole not all men thing, but, so I do want to say it's not all men, but I have had many experiences working with men where they don't really take me seriously. Like, they're paying me, but they're not taking me seriously. And I don't want to work like that. That's a waste of my time. There was a guy who gave me a book. I went through his whole book. We had a long conversation about it. He went off, and then he wrote me, he's like, I don't think I found that really helpful. And then an hour later, he writes me back and he says, oh, I finally read what you said, and I think it is helpful.
Jeez.
Wow. And then, and in that message, it's like, you must think I'm crazy. And I'm like, it was not, crazy wasn't the word I was thinking. Yeah. But unfortunately, that has been my experience with some of the men who come to work with me. Definitely not all. And, and even now, I find, because my work is for women, there are still men who will come to me and say, I know you say you work with women, but can we talk anyway? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And those men are always wonderful to work with, because they're not caught up in what's for men, what's for women. They see me. They like what I do. They like how I work, and that's how we make our choices. Yeah. And I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I have to say, sort of, in my day-to-day life, I don't feel like the men in my life treat me like that. I feel like they treat me with respect. And, I'd say most of my friends are my female friends' husbands at this point. But my son, he's 10, he started taking jujitsu recently. And sometimes he'll go to his class and there'll only be girls there and they spar with him, and he's newer and they're better at it than him and they know what to do. And he's cool with that.
Yeah.
He's there
what
for
a great
learning.
lesson for him to learn.
But I don't think he had to learn it. He just knew it.
Because he saw it modeled by you.
I hope so. But not just me, but me and my husband. Because that couldn't have been modeled with me on my own.
Yeah. Because if he sees it's got to be both of you. Because if you see dad doing something different, that's gonna stick more than just seeing you guys be in lockstep on that.
Right. And I just love that it never occurred to him that just because she's a girl that he should be stronger. Because there's so many other variables. There's so many other variables that, well, she's older, she's larger, she has more experience. And none of that was the issue. It was about him wanting to learn how to do this thing. And he walked away exhausted because jiu-jitsu, I've never done it. I don't really plan to. But my husband loves it. Noah loves it. Charlie loves it. And that's their thing to do together. Yeah. And just that they walk away exhausted, but they walk away really, really feeling balanced. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And again, people hate the term toxic masculinity, but and a lot of times they'll define it as, boys aren't allowed to play police officer, which, yes, I think there are times that that's what happens. But I think it's the idea that a boy or a man can't learn from a woman is very toxic. How much do you miss out on in life if you've decided that half of the population of the world is somebody you can't work with?
Yeah, it's nothing to offer you. Well, and I think too, just if you run into someone that has a problem with that term, then I would ask them to get curious with themselves. Why does that bother you so much? I think you need to dig into your own history, your own narratives, what you've modeled. But I also want to go back to how beautiful it is that the jiu-jitsu is the thing that your sons and husband do together, and your husband is right there supporting. I know so many dads that even if the little boy didn't come away thinking anything about a girl, that would make something of it or say something about it, that your husband is healthy enough and well adjusted enough in just recognizing it for what it was and not creating a thing that wasn't there.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's really powerful.
Just because you're so used to it being there. Exactly.
Yeah. Such a cultural narrative.
Expectations that come along with it for both men and women, or any place you fall on the spectrum. Yeah. I think having specific expectations for what you're supposed to be is not healthy for anyone.
No, it puts those boxes in place and doesn't allow people to just show up as who they are authentically. And how they were made to be, and be comfortable and feel safe in doing that. And really, even though it wasn't necessarily your intent in the beginning, you having this space that's there available to women, to those who identify as women, to non-binary folks, it creates a space of safety where they know they can come in, because they may not have had great experiences trying to be their authentic selves out in the day-to-day world that they live in. So knowing that they can come to this space and be seen and known and heard for who they are allows them to do their best work, their best writing.
And there's something about writing that makes it harder for people to be authentic. Or to really express themselves authentically because of the critical self-editor.
Yes.
And the desire for perfection. And I would say the writing process, because I've always talked about writing since college, and I have an amazing writing mentor in college who's talked about writing as the process. Yeah. I think we often have to be a writer, you have an idea, you sit down, and then you just write it when it comes out, and that's the story, as opposed to the chaotic messiness that is what writing really is. Yeah. And it is a process of unfolding and going back and rethinking. And there's also a translation process, because I meet people all the time. I have an idea for a story. I've been thinking about it, and it exists in one way in their minds. And then and my mind too, this happens to
Sure.
me. I mean, I've been writing for a long time. It's not like you graduate out of this. It's part of the process. You know, lest somebody listening think, oh, if I were a better writer, I would be able to be more perfect. It's a translation process. You have it in your head, and the process of taking it from your brain and writing it in actual words on a piece of paper requires translation. So if you ever learned a new language, imagine trying to talk in a language that you don't have the words for it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what a first draft is. A first draft is awkward and chaotic and uncomfortable. And I think it's so important to sit with that.
Yeah.
Sit in the discomfort, because what comes out of it, I mean, I call it the chaos of creativity. Creativity in its, who you are, what you want to express to people, is when it's in its purest, most creative form, is going to be very chaotic, and other people may not understand it. It has to be refined and translated. But I highly recommend people get really comfortable with that. And I think getting comfortable with that in the writing process, models getting comfortable with that in all areas of your life.
Yeah, because let's face it, life is chaotic and a little unhinged at times. I mean, that's really more in alignment with how life goes. And I learned that when I was doing memoir writing, that was one of the most important things I had to learn. I had to throw away all the rules about writing that I knew. I had to throw away all the expectations, all the perfections, all of whether it was grammatically correct, and just show up and find my voice. And that was one of the most powerful things that ever happened to me, and really opened the door to the journey I've been on ever since then, of being my truest, most authentic, healthiest self. And there's so much power in that.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I love doing is when I'm talking with people, I ask a lot of questions. And what I find, those questions, like you ask and you ask because something won't quite fit together. That's the lovely thing of a story.
Yeah.
It doesn't, when something's not quite fitting together, I keep asking questions. Well, what about this? And why does this person feel this way? And why does this person feel that way? And well, why would that person act that way? Because that doesn't make sense. And the more you ask, and I think even more so with memoir, because with memoir, it's literally, you're asking the author to understand themselves better. In asking those questions, you become more and more authentic, and you come closer to what you want. And it's incredibly liberating. And I mean, writing is such a great way to express that, because at the beginning, writing is your own. And you choose people that you trust to give you feedback, but it's solitary, and it's such a great playground to really get to your own voice and yourself and what you want, and then you share it with other people when you're ready.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's so good. So good. And there's so many things we could go down that road, but I'm going to save that for another day and another conversation. But thank you for that. I love that so much. And this really goes nicely into coming back to your why and your values and everything you do. You've been able to do that and find that through these intentional practices that you put into place by taking the time to learn what you needed, what you wanted, how you best show up for people in a workspace, and who you provide that to. That's really been able to be formulated and really is obvious as me, an outsider looking in. But talk to me about your why and values journey and how that's informed you.
My why and values journey. So, okay, I'm going to just take a quick step back. So the first book I wrote, well, not the first, but the first one I published, is called The Writer's Roadmap. And the entire first chapter is dedicated to that. It's what do you want out of your life? And then to distill it into one sentence. And I'm really big on one sentences, because if you can describe something in one sentence, it means you're clear. It's when you're saying like add here and add here, and there's this addendum and da da da, that it's a sign that it's time to clarify a little bit. So I would say my why is I want to sort of on a top level, I want to make this world a place where people can be honest about who they are and communicate. Because I think that creates community where we're supporting each other, we're helping each other. And I think in doing that, all the issues, if we come if we come to those issues from a place of honesty, caring, and building community, we will be in a better world. So any political issue, whatever side of that you're on, I think that will address it.
Yeah.
And I personally do that by helping people tell their stories.
Yeah.
And creating community and telling stories, because, our stories are who we are and they reflect every piece of us. We can't tell our stories until we know what's underneath them.
Yeah.
And I'm actually working on a new project this year. It's my big project this year where, so I have my writing community that's called the Inspired Writer Workshop. And so many of the tools in it are about knowing what you want, honing that, refining it, and making choices for yourself. So, there's so much in the community and there's so much you can do. And I always tell people, don't dive into it and just do stuff. Yeah. Know what you want and then treat it like a toolbox where you take the pieces that work for you. You never go into you'd be like, I want to build a birdhouse, and then go to your toolbox and use everything in a toolbox. Yeah. But we do have a tendency to do that with creative things. Just like more is better. But knowing what you want and intentionality. And so much, I feel like what I do is about doing that for myself, and then by extension, helping the people I work with and the people around me know what they want, and then make careful choices based on what their values are. Because I do fully believe if we really did that, if we all did that, we would all be a lot happier, and we would get rid of a lot of our societal issues.
I agree 100%. I mean, I believe so passionately in the power of story, and that it has to build bridges, because you make these issues, they all of a sudden become about a human. It humanizes and the impact. And it's a lot more difficult to dismiss it when you've all of a sudden got a human connection to it.
So many people have this misconception where they'll say to themselves, well, who wants to read my story? Who cares about my story? It's not that different. It's not unique. And often people will say that, and they'll be like, what are you talking about? I've had people say that where I'm like, you're a dissident from Iran who now lives in the United States and works with other people. Like, that not many people have that story. So a lot of times people say that when their stories are actually very unique. But the reality is, you don't have to have a story that's totally unique. You don't want a story that's so unique that you don't connect with other people.
Yeah.
And that, I always say that, tell your story, because there are so many people out there that might have the same or a similar story, and hearing your story inspires them, gives them strength, gives them the courage to do things they might not have done otherwise. And often you don't know when people are hearing your stories. So you're not, I often feel like the people who will be the most supported by your story are also the most likely to not say anything.
Yeah, for sure. And you might not know about it, or you hear about it several years later. So many times it's finding those common points and finding those things that you have in common that make you feel less alone, that make you feel like, oh, maybe they can understand my experience. I wouldn't think on paper that this person and I would have connect points. That's what I learned over and over again, is I would have these connect points with people from backgrounds and ages and generations and socioeconomic spaces and ethnicities and all these things that on paper we should not have that part of our stories in common, but yet we do. And we've got a place to meet, to come together, where we find where our values actually do align. We just might have a different idea of how to get there. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, that values piece can really come in where you can find common ground for values as you listen to each other's stories. And then once you can find common ground in values, then you can start talking about, okay, we have the same values here. So how do we bridge the gap in the differences on how to approach this now that we've humanized this situation and heard each other's stories?
Exactly. And I think it's probably easier to bridge a gap of that. Like it's easier to bridge a gap of life differences than it is to bridge a
Sure.
gap of values differences.
I
I
agree.
think that's a lot
100%.
harder.
It is a lot harder because you got to break down more. But I'm with you in that. I said this a few years ago, and I've said it before on the show a few times. But when I said, I'm like, I think everybody in government, in Congress, that are leaders everywhere should have to participate in some sort of writing exercise that introduces, whether it's memoir writing or that some way to introduce themselves to each other in a way that humanizes people. And so instead of seeing them by virtue of what you know about them on the surface and who their associations are and what parties they belong to and all this, you just get to know them as a person. And then after that, then you can start working together. I feel like, but
Exactly.
but you have to have safe spaces where people feel like they can share that and do that. And we could talk about that all day, but that values piece and 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 you know, identifying those things like, okay, how can, with this set of values, can I help other people find their values and be able to name those things and live a life out of that that feels authentic to them? There's so much power in that. If we could all embark on that, I agree with you, we could solve so many problems. And this goes, we've talked around and about this really a lot already, but living out of your own expectations versus others' expectations. We've talked about being able to figure it out what it is we want versus responding according to what we think someone else wants, or even having to stop and ask ourselves, what is it do that I want? Because I've been operating so much from a space of making sure everybody else's needs and wants and expectations are met. So talk about your journey and really learning how to do this and communicate that, because that's the other piece. If we're going to set boundaries, if we're going to live out of our values and why authentically, if we're going to live out of our own expectations versus others, and also be reasonable with what we expect of others, we have to communicate that. People are not mind readers. And so many times the communication part is the part that's missing. So talk to me about your expectations journey within all of that.
So I think in the beginning, I just didn't really know what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted for a long time. And it's funny because I've always been a person who I have strong opinions. I show up as myself. So it's funny to think that I don't think I really knew what I wanted. And I think in a sense it was because like my own fears about what I wanted. Can I get it? Sometimes it's easier to say, like, my kid needs to go to football practice. I'm going to deal with that than to say I'm going to work on this really scary new project that might fail.
Yeah.
The fact that I can see, I was writing in my journal recently, and I started this year. I have a whole plan for my year, what I do. And I started to notice that I was doing a lot, but I wasn't actually working on my main project. And it was because of fear. And I realized it's because of fear, because, like, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
And while staying in fear isn't useful, I think recognizing the fear is useful.
Yeah.
And I think that I think it's actually fears before expectations, knowing what your fears are and seeing how are they getting in the way of what you actually want and what you expect and how you want things to play out. And then I think there's another aspect of, part of what I want is the same thing that my family wants. And I do want to show up for them, and finding the balance between them it's an ongoing process too.
Yeah.
You know, it's ongoing. But I mean, I hate to say it. I think it's also very, I hate to say it. I think it's also very much based on fear.
Yeah.
You know, that sometimes it's just easier to choose them over myself because I don't want to deal with, well, I want to write a book and I need a lot of time and space to write a book. And what happens if I don't, you know, or what if I want to make my living writing or whatever it might be? And what happens if I don't make it and I can't do it? And then I've taken all this time, but I could have been doing things for other people, you know, and that's sort of, those feel like impossible stakes.
Yeah.
You know, and what I would say is, well, first of all, if you don't even try, you're never going to know. But second of all, I'm a very big believer that if you keep pushing forward a little bit at a time, you will get what you want. It may not always look exactly as you envisioned it at the beginning, but if you keep moving forward, you will. And how that looked for me, you know, it took because of writing and creative things in general, because it's not like, oh, you know, you're a lawyer, we understand how lawyers make money. We don't understand how writers make money. And money is such a defining factor of worth.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I don't know, money is important and you deserve to be paid for your work. So there has to be a balance. But, you know, if you had to choose between a partner who had lots and lots of money and could provide for all your needs, but was a total dickhead,
Exactly.
I mean, like, what kind of, like, or do you want to raise children with somebody who, you know, shows up, who cares, who doesn't get angry all the time? So, you know, our values are so important and who you are as a person. And so money we can't allow money to define us, while also trying to make sure that we do actually stand up and say, hey, you need to pay me for my writing.
Yeah.
But writing takes a very long time before, or it took me a long time to get to a point where I wasn't thinking about money, my writing in terms of money, and could value it in and of itself. But the reality is that creative work has value separate from the money, and they're two different processes. You create something and it has value and it is what it is, and then you make money from it. I mean, Van Gogh, I think, is a really good example of that. Nobody liked his painting. His own brother was an art dealer and couldn't or wouldn't sell his work, you know, and yet here we are all these years later, lauding him as the creative, you know, and his paintings have incredible value, money value, but his life did not benefit from that. So, you know, why not? Again, it's the same thing. Why, instead of waiting until we're sick to take care of ourselves, why not value our creative work before it makes money? Because it's easier to make money with something if we value it and then say, oh, I've made this thing, it's really beautiful, I would like someone to value it and pay me for it. It's much harder to say that if you didn't value it in the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so and that the way you approach it, and I'm so glad you brought up fear, because I think fear can be something that we fall back on and even find a way to blame later. Well, I didn't make that choice, or I didn't live honor my expectations or my hopes or my boundaries here. This thing got in the way. I had to take my son to football practice. We had this activity this weekend when really it was just, someone's, my husband could have taken him, or buddy's mom or dad could have picked him up. I just used that as an excuse to not confront the fear, but yet it's still weighing on me and it's still in the back of my head. And it's still like, until I do something about it, it's going to be like a low simmer in there. And so just being willing, but also feeling supported in doing that. I think so much of living out of our own expectations is feeling like we're in an environment that's supportive of us doing that. And really, we just have to get out of our own way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, looking at ourselves, figuring out what we want, figuring out what our flaws are, figuring out what our fears are is the best place to start.
Yeah, because absolutely.
Only then can you start looking around you in the elements of your life and making decisions like, well, how do I want this to work? Who are the people I really want in my life? How do I want to interact with people?
Yeah. And that goes exactly into the next talking point of accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. That's the layers journey, unpacking that, unraveling all of that, getting in touch with that, acknowledging that, and accepting the parts of ourselves and journeys and seasons and decisions we made that we don't love, but doing it with curiosity rather than judgment. So talk to me about your layers journey. You have a really clear understanding of the layers. So talk to me about that layers journey.
Well, I think, in a sense, sort of embracing all those layers for me translates into just trying to have as much patience as possible with myself. Because, no matter what I do, no matter what day I go through, there's going to be positive and there's going to be negatives. There's going to be things that work and things that don't. And, when you were saying before, going through something that if you're not really happy about, I've seen it unfold enough times with myself and with others that just because I'm not happy with something now doesn't mean that I'm not going to look back in 5 or however many years and say, oh, actually, that was exactly what it needed to be.
Yeah.
So, having that patience just to let it unfold and to sit with the discomfort, because growth is uncomfortable. And I mean, I think even psychologically, that's often how it works. When we're growing and we're changing and we're moving toward what we really want and becoming what we want to be, there's an old part of ourselves that's like, hold up, that's scary, don't go there. And so a lot of our old fears and the things that have been holding us back come back. And they're like, and I think that also happens with relationships. I can't remember what book it was from, but I remember reading this years ago, that when you have a family pattern, or say you're in a relationship with somebody, whatever the relationship is, and there's something that you don't like about it. Now, let's say I'm completely making this up, and you have 2 sisters at the Thanksgiving table, and one want this, and you're pushing back and pushing back and pushing back, one to the other, and then one in this relationship is like, I don't want this anymore, and stops doing the dance. The other person is going to come back even harder because they don't want that dance to stop. They're used to the pattern, they're used to doing it. And I think we do that with ourselves. But there's a part of us that's like, nope, don't take time to write. Don't take back. Don't go for a walk. Don't say no, because then all these terrible things are going to happen. Yeah. And I think that's that is part of the process. I was writing about that this morning because I was struggling with something of my own like that. I can't remember what it is offhand. That's funny. But I think it happens in a lot of places where that back and forth. Yeah. Like our lives aren't linear. We're not, our lives aren't linear. We're like whether it's losing weight or writing a book or starting a new habit, you do a little, okay, here we are, 3rd week of New Year, whatever New Year's resolutions you started. Maybe you were perfect for the first 2 weeks, and then maybe like by the end of the 2nd week, it started to unravel. That's part of the process, because then you pick up and you do it again. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that, because I think something that we don't consider sometimes is we have to, when we start on a different route or journey that we know is going to be better or healthier, or that we need to try, or that we're just curious about, our nervous system equates safety and familiarity with each other. So you're going to get pushback from your conscious, your subconscious, your nervous system, while you're retraining it to do this new thing, to embark on this new way of approaching something, and being able to get past that discomfort that it's bringing, and not mistaking it for a sign that you're doing something wrong or that you shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, our brains that nervous systems will definitely tell us that something is wrong. And it's hard to, as much as we can ignore lots of things, like I'm too tired, I'm too this, I'm too the other, somehow we don't ignore the thing that tries to pull us back into being who we're trying, into not being who we don't want to be anymore. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I know. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating process. So thank you for all that. So good. And you've talked about relationships throughout this in different ways, but
in living out feel, which is finding empowerment, embracing layers, which you've shared so many examples of how you live your life in this way. Talk to me about the impact of your relationship with yourself through that process and how that's evolved and changed, as well as your relationship with other people.
I think the way, my relationship with myself has changed. When I think about who I was when I was living in New York, I was a stay-at-home mom, I had a baby, I wasn't feeling well. And at the time, and I wanted to write, and I didn't know how to start. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was writing. The crazy thing is, I had a master's in creative writing and education at that point, but I didn't know how to make myself be a writer. So even after having a master's, even I was teaching writing, I didn't feel like I was a writer. And I think it's a matter of there are a lot of different ways. What is it? It's feel, do, be. So they say, or what is it? Do, be, feel, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not helpful at all. I don't remember the order. But basically, I think there's a part of it where you just have to decide what you want and take the actions. But my journal, I blogged it actually. So my blog was my journal. The beginning parts are like all about how scared I am. And, I spent a lot of time on this Overheard New York website where there were all snippets that people would overhear. Because I would see where it would take place. And I'd be like, I remember that place. And, but the more I traveled and the more places I saw and the more excitement that I found in travel and meeting people, slowly but surely, I was no longer that sort of scared person who spent most of my time in my apartment in Brooklyn because I had a baby. And had no problem kind of going out and talking to, because when you're traveling, you have no choice but to talk to strangers. And sometimes you want to talk to strangers and you get to meet people or you do all these different things. And over time, I changed how it just became natural. It wasn't natural in the beginning. Sometimes I forced myself to do it. Sometimes I had no choice because that was the situation I was in. Yeah. And I went through the steps and now that's just kind of who I am.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I love that evolution of that. And sometimes we do have to kind of talk okay, I'm going to take action and I'm going to wait for the rest of me to follow. But I'm not going to just sit here and not do anything and take next steps anymore. I'm not going to let the fear dictate, me just not taking action and continuing to live in this way that I know is not healthy and good for me.
Yep. And then when you get that internal pushback, think about it. Also, there's so many different types of support you can get, whether it's talking to a friend or going to therapy or, quite frankly, doing jujitsu or having a morning ritual, whatever it is. Yeah. Test things out and find out what are the things that help you remain in the discomfort of change until you know enough what it is to make a decision about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, so good. Thank you so much. All right. We are down to the end here with the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Yoga, meditation, going for walks, hanging out with my kids, and cooking.
Oh,
kids
great.
And family in general.
Yeah. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
I want to feel confident. I want to feel happy. I want to feel secure. I would like to feel well rested. And I want to have fun.
Yeah, fun, I think, is one of those things that we have to really give more time to. There's so much more value in that than I think we realize when we stop and start considering, do I make space for fun? And all of the benefits of doing that for myself. I think I'm so glad you brought that up. That's so good.
Fun was one of, in my one sentence overview of my plan. For many years, fun was one of the first words in it for that reason.
Yeah. It's bringing it back to our attention and then knowing that it's valuable. Absolutely. Absolutely. So good. Tell people where they can find you, how they can follow you, and Listeners, this will all be on our website, embracinglayers.com, on our resources page. We'll also be sharing it throughout our socials, but share that with people real quick.
Sure. So the two best places to find me, the first one is my website. And I'm going to give you a special link that's for your listeners.
Okay.
That's specifically for podcasts. And
Awesome.
It's a contact form. And so it's leighshulman.com, which is my website /podcasts. And it's basically it's a very simple, name, email, and then tell me what's up. And I always like to say to people, really tell me. And if you feel like you're babbling, that's probably a good sign, because that means you're just getting it out there. Because I can't, the more you tell me, and when you do feel a little bit unleashed or unhinged, for me, that's a really good place to be, because it means you're really telling me what you want. So if there's a part of you that's like, oh, I'm just going on and on, don't worry about it. Just keep going. I love hearing it. And then the other great place to connect with me is Instagram. Okay. It's the main social media place where I check everything. I always respond to everything. And I'm there just about every day. And my handle there is Leigh Shulman. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a great conversation. We could talk forever about so many things. And I appreciate how you show up in the world, and the work that you do in spaces you provide for women to come and find their voices, and places to really hone that and discover that and tap into that. And I look forward to having conversations with you in the future. I know I'm going to be talking to you in different ways, but thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Lisa. Absolutely. Absolutely. Listeners, tap into that. Get curious this week. Have you taken some time for yourself lately? Are you engaging in anything that's fun or refreshing? Do you need to relook at your calendar and set some boundaries for yourself to take care of yourself? It's not selfish. And Leigh and I are here both to tell you that today. So we hope you find some inspiration in that this week. Take good care and have a great week. Hello, Melissa Crook here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Feel podcast today, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers. I hope you found today's framework and resources supportive and informative. To learn more about all that we offer here at the Embracing Layers Network, visit embracinglayers.com. You can go to our contact form to schedule me as a speaker for your next conference, workshop, or seminar. You can go to our book page to order our book that Jessica Garrison, our wonderful and talented writer and author, authored with my support. And engage with this framework in written form, with your journal, or in a book club with other women, inviting them on this journey with you. You can look at our resources page for all of the helpful and insightful resources our guests offer and share. You can find the schedule for our weekly Together We Feel women's panel conversations that we're holding each Monday on our YouTube channel. And you can find the links to all the spaces and places you can follow, engage with us on social media, and join our engagements that are happening on our Substack site. There is also a donation page where you can donate to support our work to ensure we can continue to bring you these incredible guests, conversations, and support. Thanks again for joining me this week. Share with your friends and give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Your feedback helps us ensure we're bringing you the content that will best support you and having an empowered, embracing layers journey. Take good care, and thanks for giving us some of your valuable time today. We truly appreciate you so deeply.